The courtroom in Norfolk fell silent the moment Judge Harlan Whitfield raised his hand and pointed at the woman standing before him. "Take that off," he barked, glaring at the faded green ball cap she wore low over her eyes. The one with 3 small letters stitched above the brim. She had walked in for a simple traffic violation hearing, nothing more. But something about her calm silence had irritated him from the start. She didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She simply reached up, fingers trembling slightly, and began to lift the cap from her head. If you've ever been judged before anyone knew your story, you already know how this feels, so stay with me. Because what happens next will remind you why we should never assume we know someone's whole life just by looking at them. Her name was Mara Ellison, 29 years old, a woman who had spent 6 years of her life in places she was never allowed to speak of, doing work that would never appear in any newspaper. The cap wasn't fashion. It wasn't defiance. It was the only thing she had left of a teammate who didn't come home from a mission in the mountains 3 years ago. The 3 letters stitched on it were his initials, sewn by her own hands the week after his funeral. As her fingers touched the brim, the courtroom door opened. A tall man in a crisp Navy service uniform stepped in, silver eagles gleaming on his shoulders. But it was the trident pinned above his ribbons that made 2 bailiffs straighten instantly. Rear Admiral Thomas Bragg had not planned to be there that morning. He had come to observe a case involving a young sailor, but his eyes locked onto the cap in Mara's hand, onto the faded stitching, and his breath caught in his throat like a held grenade. "Belay that," he said, voice low but carrying across the room like a command shouted from a ship's bridge. "Your Honor, do you know whose Callsign that is?" Judge Whitfield blinked, caught off guard by the interruption. "Admiral, this is my courtroom, with respect. Sir, that Callsign belongs to one of only 4 women who ever completed our program's most brutal selection course. She carried wounded men on her back through terrain that broke soldiers twice her size. She earned that hat. She earned the right to wear it anywhere she damn well pleases." The Admiral's words weren't loud, but they landed like thunder rolling over still water. Mara's hand froze halfway to removing the cap. Tears she'd held back for years suddenly threatening to break through, not from shame, but from being seen for the first time in a place that only ever saw her as ordinary. The judge, for the first time in decades of ruling with an iron gavel, felt something unfamiliar: humility. He asked the bailiff to bring a chair, not for himself, but for Mara. He asked her, gently this time, to sit and tell her story if she was willing, and she did. She spoke about the mountain, about carrying her wounded friend for 4 miles through snow with a fractured wrist, about the letter she wrote to his mother every single year on his birthday, because promises made in blood don't end when the mission does. The courtroom, full of strangers who had come for a mundane Tuesday docket, sat in stunned, reverent silence. When she finished, Judge Whitfield did something no one expected. He stood up, walked down from his bench, extended his hand, and thanked her for her service, and for her patience with an old man who judged too quickly. The traffic case was dismissed without another word. If this story moved something in you, imagine how many quiet heroes walk past us every day, judged by a glance instead of a lifetime of sacrifice we never see. So take a second to like this video and subscribe, because stories like Mara's deserve to be remembered, shared, and honored, not forgotten in the noise of everyday life. Outside the courthouse, Admiral Bragg placed a hand on her shoulder and simply said, "Wear it proud, petty officer." He'd be proud too. Mara looked down at the cap, then back up at the sky, feeling for the first time in years that the weight she carried wasn't invisible anymore. And as she placed it gently back on her head, walking into the sunlight, something inside her finally began to heal.